Hey guys, I am the Comics Kid 2099, and I am here to present to you a video of
Missed opportunities.
If you have never seen one of these videos before, basically I take a look at a book or a TV show or a movie and I say this is what they did and this is what they should have done. And sometimes it's actually altering a plot point that is literally right there in the book or TV show or movie. And in today's case, it's actually a missed opportunity where they didn't do something, and it's not so much where I'm saying this is a plot point that they should have changed, it's this is a plot point that should have been a thing, period. I am going to be talking a little bit about the post-Final Crisis world of DC Comics. Recently, I finished reading Final Crisis, which is a event from DC Comics from about 2008, I think. It was written by Grant Morrison. It was 7 issues long, and there was a whole slew of tie-ins. I've only read one of the tie-ins, plus whatever is collected in the actual trade paperback for Final Crisis. Now, I'm going to be spoiling specifically one element of the very end of Final Crisis, so if you haven't read the book, probably you should just go ahead and turn this video off, at least until you have the time to read Final Crisis. Or, if you don't care about spoilers, then go ahead, keep watching this video. I'm not going to bother doing the thumbs up thing where as long as my thumb is up, I'm spoiling, because basically, for the rest of this video, I guarantee you there's going to be at least one thing about Final Crisis that I am going to be spoiling, and I don't feel like holding my hand up for 10 minutes of video. So with that being said, I feel like I have given you plenty of opportunities to turn this video off if you have not read Final Crisis, so now I can go right ahead into talking about my missed opportunity. Specifically, I wanted to talk about Renee Montoya in Final Crisis. Now, leading up to this, in the series 52, Renee Montoya, she was just an ordinary detective in Gotham City. She debuted in Batman the Animated Series, and then she was given a lot more character development in the comic books, and eventually, in the series 52, the writers, I believe it was Greg Rucka specifically, turned her into the new Question. And then she was kind of floating around the DC universe. I think she showed up a little bit in the Batwoman series, but in Final Crisis, she's just kind of hanging around, doing her thing. Final Crisis has got a lot of characters in it, so she didn't have a whole lot to do because none of the characters really had a whole lot to do. But at one point, the Checkmate organization, which is kind of sort of the DC Universe equivalent of S.H.I.E.L.D. If you know what S.H.I.E.L.D. is, that's basically what Checkmate is for the DC Universe. Checkmate recruits Renee Montoya to be a member of the Global Peace Agency. And if you are a fairly new reader, if you don't read a lot of stuff from the days of yesteryear, you are probably not going to understand what this was in reference to, but this was in reference to the 1970s Jack Kirby series OMAC. OMAC was a one-man automated something or another. It's an anagram. I don't know off the top of my head what it stands for. Basically, he was a living super weapon, and his bosses were members of the Global Peace Agency. None of them had faces. They used a chemical compound to hide their faces because they represented the everyman. And if you saw their face, that took away from the everyman quality. At least that's from what I understand, and that's what I remember from OMAC. It's been quite a few years since I read that series. So basically, the exact same thing as the Question, except they are the authority as opposed to the man fighting the authority. But the same chemical compound stuff, that's like the exact same thing that the Question uses to hide his face. So basically, Grant Morrison in Final Crisis is saying, look, the Question is the Proto-Global Peace Agency agent. And I thought that was a pretty neat idea. Now, from what I understand, I haven't read a whole lot of Renee Montoya's appearances after Final Crisis, but from what I understand, she was appearing in backup features in Detective Comics after Final Crisis. I have not read really any Batman stuff set after Final Crisis, so I haven't gotten around to reading those stories yet. But that is not the opportunity that I wish DC had gone with. If you will, allow me really quickly to stop talking about Renee Montoya for a little bit and talk about some of the other stuff happening in Final Crisis. Basically, Final Crisis, it seems to me, was in a large way trying to set up all of the Jack Kirby stuff from the 1970s as a new thing in the new post-Infinite Crisis world. So you had this teenage boy, we don't know his name, but if you look at him, you're like, oh, okay, that's Kamandi. Kamandi was basically a human being. He was, I think, the last human being on Earth. All the other sentients on Earth were animal humans. So you had like an army of tiger people. You had like ape people. You had all of these animal humans who lived on Earth, and this was in the 1970s. It was basically a rip on Planet of the Apes, except that instead of just apes, it was all kinds of animals. And so you've got this little boy living in the ruins of Bloodhaven, and there is this Command D, a level where all of these evil experiments happen underneath Bloodhaven, and that's how we assume this little boy will get his name, Command D. And there are all these evil tigers who are created to work for Darkseid in Final Crisis. And you're saying, oh, I see what's going on. Those tigers are the evil tigers that we'll eventually see in Commandy. And then the other final element that I want to talk about in regards to this video and Final Crisis was that the whole plot of the story, if I can call it such, was that the fourth world, which was a Jack Kirby concept that he also created in the 1970s, the fourth world is coming to an end, and with it, the beginning of the fifth world. Now, as near as I can tell, we never actually got to see the fifth world in DC Comics. We don't know if it was meant to be a new level of gods who are even more powerful than the fourth world gods like Orion and Darkseid. I don't know. I haven't read a whole lot of DC stuff from after Final Crisis, and even the stuff that I have read, I'm not entirely sure if it ties into the fifth world or if that plot point was just basically abandoned. Here is where all of this kind of comes together. You've got Renee Montoya. She's a member of the Global Peace Agency as of Final Crisis. You've got this little boy who's going to become sort of a freedom fighter, rebel in the Commandy series. And then you've got these young teenage superheroes from Japan. They are called the Super Young Team. And like everyone else in Final Crisis, they don't really get a whole lot to do at all. But basically at one point we see like all five of them riding on this giant motorcycle convertible car thing, and it's kind of meant to evoke the Forever People from Jack Kirby's Fourth World. I should go ahead and mention that back in the 1970s, Jack Kirby didn't really intend for most of these things to be tied to the DC Universe. The closest thing that was part of the DC Universe was the Fourth World books, which all began in Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen. So from the beginning, that stuff was tied to the DC Universe, but Jack Kirby notoriously didn't really want to use DC characters, but he was forced by editorial to use characters like Deadman in the Mr. Miracle series, so the DC Universe was kind of forced on him and he went ahead and used it. But for some of his other creations, like Omak, Commandy, and Etrigan the Demon, basically those creations were meant to just be their own little world, not really connected to anything. But then future writers after Jack Kirby, they connected Omak to Commandy, and they connected Commandy to the DC Universe, and Omak to the DC Universe, and Etrigan pretty easily is tied to the DC Universe now. So basically all of this exists in the DC Universe. But as near as I can tell, and it is admittedly pretty hard to understand what's going on in Final Crisis, Grant Morrison was trying to set up a way for all of these concepts to kind of be removed from the DC Universe, but at the same time, I think he was trying to set up a new status quo where, in theory, you could do an ongoing series with all of these Jack Kirby concepts all set on one world away from the DC Universe. I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, so I should get back to the plot of Final Crisis. Basically, if you haven't read Final Crisis and you're still watching this video, what happened was you had the multiverse, which after Infinite Crisis was 52 alternate worlds that all more or less look the same, but they all have slightly different histories. And then in between Infinite Crisis and Final Crisis, one of these worlds is basically destroyed completely. All of life is completely destroyed. We see the Statue of Liberty is like halfway buried in the ground, and then it's like, okay, this is supposed to be the world that Commandy will live on eventually. And because Darkseid and this evil vampire Monitor are taking over planet Earth, Superman and Checkmate and all of of these superheroes, they are trying to evacuate planet Earth onto one of the alternate Earths so that they can at least temporarily escape from all of the evil that's going on. And so Checkmate is able to evacuate a lot of the people living in Bloodhaven onto this alternate world, and that includes the blonde boy with the ripped blue jeans and all of this army of tigers. I think the super young team is also evacuated to this world, and I don't think the Question is on this world or the Global Peace Agents, but those other guys, they are now on this world, and then the bridge gets cut off, so these guys are basically stuck on this hellish world where there is no life, and then everything is hunky-dory over here on the real world where all of the other superheroes are basically A-okay. So, after all of that really long preamble, what is my missed opportunity? Basically, I think we should have had an ongoing series where we get to see Kamandi on this alternate world with these refugees from Bloodhaven and these animal creations who were created to be servants of Darkseid, all trying to live together peacefully. It would sort of basically be the same thing as the Jack Kirby Kamandi series, but since I haven't read that series, I don't exactly know what it's about beyond the very loose premise. But I think this would have made a very interesting post-Final Crisis series. And if you wanted to get really squirrely, you could even take Renee Montoya and all of the other Global Peace Agents, and you could evacuate them onto this world with them as well. This, of course, would mean changing part of Final Crisis and not just what happened after Final Crisis. But I think it would be really neat to just take all of the Jack Kirby stuff without the demon, I guess, because he wasn't really part of Final Crisis, and it would be kind of hard to evacuate him to another world since he is a demon. It would be really neat to take, like, Kamandi, Omak, and the Forever People, or the new Forever People, and have them all coexist on basically what I will now call Kirby World. Who would not want to read a comic book about Kirby World? All of Jack Kirby's DC Comics characters existing on one world. Well, with the exception of the rest of the Fourth World and the Sandman, and okay, you get the idea. Basically, the awesome Kirby stuff from the 1970s that, at least in my humble opinion, are really cool and need to be remembered for the great things that they are. All of those things would be on a separate world where you could do whatever you want with them, and you don't have to worry about, but why does Superman not come and just save the day? Because Superman is on another world and he is not able to come and save the day. This has probably been a really confusing video because I'm kind of trying to explain Final Crisis to the best of my ability, or at the very least explain this one part of Final Crisis, and that's not an easy task even if you really enjoyed Final Crisis. So I'm sorry if I confused you. You're probably going to give this video a thumbs down if it did confuse you, and hey, I probably earned it. I didn't quite explain what I wanted well enough, but basically, if you're a fan of Jack Kirby and all the things I talked about today, you probably understood what I was trying to say. So basically, to sum everything up in a 5-second summation, I think that we should have had all of the Jack Kirby stuff from Final Crisis in an ongoing series after Final Crisis. But we know somewhat recently that the artist Paul Pope pitched a Kamandi series to Dan Didio, and Dan Didio told him, wait a minute, you want to do comic books for children? Pshaw, if you want to do that, go draw Archie comics. And so basically I think DC Comics lost like 100 readers with that stupid statement, and they also, I think, lost Paul Pope with that. So it seems that DC is not very interested in doing really awesome stuff with Kamandi or Omak or good stuff with the Fourth World characters. So that's about all I have to say here. What did you guys think of this video? Do you approve of what I said? Do you disapprove? If you approve, be sure to like, share, comment, and, I don't know, subscribe. And I will be back tomorrow with another kind of video. So until then, I will see you guys later. Have a great day.